To get started today, we're going to start with a question. And to meet our panelists at the same time, I'd like everyone on the panel to give one sign that you have a healthy chicken and one sign that your chickens are not healthy. This question comes from Ted and Brenda on Facebook, as well as Joan. First, we have Dr. Cheryl Davison, Director of the Laboratory of Avian Medicine and Pathology at the University of Pennsylvania and Agriculture Spokesperson for Penn Vet. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Davison. Dr. Davison, could you give us one sign that you have a healthy chicken and one sign that your chickens are not healthy?
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate being here today and being able to be part of this webinar. It's very important for owners to understand whether their chicken is healthy or not, and many times chickens tend to, and all birds tend to, not show us that they're sick before they actually show the signs. So we have owners come in and say, well, my bird's only been sick for a couple of days, when in fact they've probably been sick for a longer period of time because they haven't shown us that they were ill. So one thing we've encouraged owners to do is to learn how to handle their birds, pick them up, and get the birds used to being handled. And what I'd like owners to do is pick them up and check the muscle or the breast muscle around the keel bone, which is the breastbone, and look at that. If a bird is sick, they tend to lose weight. When they lose weight, they lose that muscle on either side of the breastbone. So if you find that they're losing weight, then bring that bird to your veterinarian. Many times we can catch something early on rather than waiting until they show the signs. So please be comfortable in picking up your birds, being comfortable in checking that area so we can catch things early on so we can potentially treat those birds.
Great, thank you. Next on the panel, we have Dr. Gordon Balam, Director of Lifestyle Innovations and Technical Service with Purina Animal Nutrition. Dr. Balam's team's researches, expertise, and interests include digestive health, poultry nutrition, and genetics. Dr. Balam, can you give us one sign of a healthy chicken and one sign that it's not so healthy?
Great. Well, thank you very much for this forum. Appreciate the opportunity to talk. Dr. Davison is quite right. Chickens and a lot of birds will hide the symptoms pretty well, but I think one of the things that you can really look at if you're looking at your birds every day is just notice their activity or their energy level. Notice their behavior, because I think a healthy chicken will be very active. It will interact with you, either positive or negative, depending on its behavior that particular day. And if you go up to it and it comes to you or it runs away, that's great, and that's a really good sign. Birds that are starting to become ill will not be as active. Their behavior will be a little bit different, and they will probably slow down in their activity, and they may have even ruffled feathers as the illness gets prolonged. Now, for baby chicks, you can hear it sometimes. You know the normal chirping of a baby chick, but when the bird is stressed or it is scared or it has a problem, it's a very different stress call. And so again, if you're around your birds all the time, you will notice those types of things, and hopefully you'll be able to catch those concerns early enough and then either treat it or take it to a veterinarian to have it properly diagnosed and treated.
Great, thanks. Thirdly, we have our team of writers and editors here at Backyard Poultry Magazine, including Alexandra Douglas, a lifelong poultry enthusiast, poultry scientist, and experienced poultry farmer. Alexandra, one tip that you have a healthy chicken and one that it's not so healthy.
Just like the other panelists have mentioned, behavior is very important. Knowing what your bird behaves like with normal clucking, how they react to you, it's very important, and observations is really necessary. Now, for a sick chicken, some of the obvious symptoms are physical nature. So that would include either having spots on the wattles. That is one of the indicators, especially here in Florida, fowlpox. Another symptom would be coughing and sneezing. These can be predicaments for other ailments as well. It is always important to watch the behavior and observe your birds. If you're out there in the morning feeding, just notice if there's any raspy breath or coughing, sneezing, because those are the signs of some serious matter later on. And if you are, concerned about it, you can always contact your state veterinarian or local veterinarian at that to see if there's any solutions to maintaining the health of your birds, as well as any antidote, antibiotics, or solutions to the behaviors you are exhibiting with the symptoms.
Great. Pam Freeman is our online content coordinator and manager of our Ask the Expert service. Pam, what would you like to add?
I always like to look at my birds' combs and wattles. A healthy bird is going to have a really nice red comb and wattle. It'll be very firm. You can really tell that bird is healthy. If a bird isn't feeling so well, that comb and wattle can be discolored. It can be a little droopy. So when you see that, it's always good to look into that situation a little further.
Great. And Jeremy Chartier. Jeremy's a graduate of Radcliffe's Hicks School of Agriculture at the University of Connecticut with an associate's in animal science and writes for us and henclass.com. Jeremy, one sign that your chicken's healthy and one that it's not.
Hi, Ryan. One sign that you have a healthy bird, I like to do a full body check. Actually, I did an article on it just recently. Pick them up, go through them, take a look at them. You especially start at the head and the face and working your way down through the feathers, especially the vent, the feet and legs. Nice, clean, clear eyes, no discharge. You're looking for a nice, clean vent out back and clean, smooth legs, unless you have a feather-footed bird. Something you don't want to see, specifically mites and lice. You're going to want to look down by the vent if you see a bunch of black little critters running around, or you see little round, look like calcified, almost ball bearings stuck to the bottom of the feathers. Those are eggs of the mites or lice. My brain fails me. Also, if you see little grains of rice walking around in the feathers, that's another issue you need to tend with. And feet and legs. If you look at them, unless some of the feather-footed breeds, sometimes you have some rougher scales, but for the most part, if they have a raised scale, that's most likely a mite infestation, and that's another problem you need to address. So look and see if your bird has any passengers, and if they do, well, that's a sign of an unhealthy bird.
Great, thank you, everybody. Seems like if you keep close attention and look and see, as Jeremy just said, you're going to catch a lot of things early. Next, we're going to turn to the panel, with a timely topic. It's supposed to snow this weekend in the East Coast again, so cold weather is in the news. Linda M. asked us on Facebook, will frostbite cause any issues? If so, how do you combat it? To begin, we'll turn to Dr. Davison. Dr. Davison, what's your advice about frostbite?
It is very timely. We've had a very difficult winter in the United States with very cold temperatures, and frostbite can be an issue. And usually it occurs on the combs, the wattles, can occur on the feet. And what the owner should do is, as we've just discussed, really look at those combs and wattles. If you see a discoloration, where it's a paleness on the combs or wattles or the feet, what you need to do is bring that bird into a warmer environment. You don't want it to go on to where the combs and wattles turn black, or the bird actually is lame and actually can't walk. So to prevent it, the important thing when you have these low temperatures, below freezing, single digits, or even worse, you want to limit their access to the outside and bring them into the coop area. But then the second part of it is really keeping that coop area very dry. And it's difficult in the wintertime because it's important to ventilate, but it's difficult to keep the coop warm while you ventilate and keep it dry. But two preventions: limit their access to the outside, keep the coop nice and dry so that coop will stay warmer. If you have any concerns, again, with the birds having a paleness in the comb, put them in a warmer environment.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Davison. Jeremy, have you seen this on your farm?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have, especially when I was more involved in the 4-H scene as a kid. My coops would have a enclosed nesting area in the back, and it'd be an open cage run. One coop would hold 8 different cages, and each pen rather could hold up to 3 to 5 birds, depending, for breeder purposes. And with having the open runs and limited space to hide from the wind, yeah, you see a lot of lost comb tips, especially for single comb birds. You'll lose the points. You also have potential losing some toes. It's generally just not good. I have since learned, quite obviously. I now have an enclosed warm barn. But one thing I do like to suggest to people who have something like I had, painter's drop cloth. It's a very handy tool. I used to staple it up onto the coops, and if you need a little more ventilation, you just tear a corner, and you can give them a little more airflow, but it doesn't restrict the light. So it's kind of like making a greenhouse out of your chicken coop. So it's one trick, but yeah, unfortunately I've seen it a little too many times.
Sure, it's a good idea. Thanks, Jeremy. On that same topic of cold, we're going to ask Dr. Balam a question. Dr. Balam, what would you suggest to add to the feed or water supply to help chickens, especially layers?
Well, birds, chickens in the cold, they can adapt very easily to fairly cold environments, but the way they do that is they have to generate body heat. And the chicken's actually core body temperature is quite a bit higher than ours, and so it needs a little bit more feed. And sometimes what I see when I visit farms is that people don't always keep the feeder full, and that's really very critical because birds have to eat to generate energy, and if they don't eat, they're eating machines. They will eat other stuff, and so they may eat the litter, they may eat rocks and little small pebbles, and that could be problematic down the road. So keep the feeder full during the wintertime because they're going to eat a little bit more. On the water side, is you've got to keep water in front of those birds at all times. Chickens will not eat if they don't drink. Chickens will drink about twice as much as they eat. In the summertime, it's a little bit more than that. So keep the water liquid, don't allow it to freeze. And the easy way to do that is there's a lot of retail stores out there that will have special waters that have base heaters. And if you have that, you have an approved electrical supply, then that is a really easy way, very inexpensive way to make sure that your birds are going to have water all the time, and they're going to be very happy and very successful in eating what they need and keeping body weight on the birds during that period of time. So those two issues, I think, would be a big help.
Great, thank you. Pam, I know you've spent some time shoveling lately. What do you do with your flock in the winter?
Yes, unfortunately, I have shoveled a lot of snow this winter. I like to keep my coop clean and well ventilated. So like Dr. Davidson had said, keeping that the moisture down to a very low point so that my chickens are not as exposed to frostbite. Also keeping that coop warm. I do, however, along with the ventilation, I do on warmer winter days, I know we haven't had many this winter yet, but on warmer winter days, I do open the full people door to the coop and let that air, that fresh air come in for the birds. On colder days, the chicken door is open, allowing some nice ventilation too. I also cover my chickens' combs and wattles, especially the roosters, with Vaseline. I know you can use other types of natural products too. And I hear a lot of people say, hey, that can be kind of dirty with the chickens. They like to kind of get that off their combs and wattles and get it into their feathers. And I tell people I've learned from experience. In the beginning, I put lots of that on, and nowadays I put less on and I put it on more frequently. And that seems to help a little bit with the frostbite issues.
Great. Winter's almost over, I promise. Christopher posted this question. It's a non-weather related question to our website. He asked, one of my new chicks is slower to exhibit normal behaviors, and her butt was plugged up, and now she's a bit smaller than the other chicks. My question is, can she catch up to the other chicks and be okay as a layer, or is she always going to be compromised and runty and not a good layer? Alexandra, we'll turn to you on this one. What are your thoughts?
Well, pasty butts are usually caused by many things. Normally it's incubation, disease, or environmental issues. Now, if the chick took longer to hatch, a lot of waste that gets accumulated with an egg when they, as soon as they pip out, they got to excrete somewhere. So what happens is they start excreting on themselves, causing pasty butt. Now, as for laying issue, there is nothing wrong with a runty chick. Reproduction and laying is a completely different thing than physical problems. So what I would recommend on that subject would be, either if you're not into culling and you do want your chick to thrive, I would separate it and give it some TLC, give it some vitamins and minerals. An option is you can go to your local grocery store and get infant polyvisol without iron, and that is packed full of vitamins and minerals, just a few drops in the water, and it brings them more energy in there. But pasty butt could be a cause of other issues as well. Coccidiosis is one of the factors of pasty butt sometimes. So my best recommendation is to isolate it, provide some TLC, and it most likely what it will happen is that you'll have a runt of the batch, but it might be your best layer.
Great, thanks. Pam, have you seen this? And how do you treat it?
Yeah, I have seen this, Ryan. I'm with Alexandra. Give that chick a lot of love and tender love and care. And I actually have a chicken that is still living today. It was a runty chick to start out with, and she's gotten the name Henri, and you can kind of imagine why she got that name. But we gave her a lot of good care as a chick, and yeah, she's a little smaller than everybody else, but she's a really good layer, a good member of our flock. So I say give the runny chick a chance. You'll probably be surprised at how well she turns out.
There's a life lesson in there somewhere too, so thanks, Pam. We'll turn to the doctors for our next question, which are a little more technical. Emma on Instagram asked us, my hen has developed a swollen tummy the last few days. She's still eating, running around, pecking and laying, but by the end of the day, she looks uncomfortable and tired. Her tail isn't up when she's pecking at the floor eating. Dr. Balam, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the difficulty you have is that you need a specific diagnosis from a veterinarian. There could be a number of different causes. It could be as simple as the bird just gaining a little bit more weight, or it could be a severe medical problem. And so our recommendation always is locate a veterinarian and have that veterinarian do a thorough diagnosis and give you the recommendation that's specific to what they believe the problem is.
Great. Thanks. Dr. Davison, what would you add to that?
I'd like to add some of the common things that we do see when people present their birds for swollen abdomen, which is what the caller, the person is asking about. One of the most common things that we see in birds that are about 2 to 3 years of age are tumors in the abdomen, and those tumors then form fluid in the abdomen, which makes the abdomen appear swollen. The other thing that we notice in, again, birds that are about 2 to 3 years of age, we find that they can get infected oviducts. And so then again, that oviduct will swell up with material and eggs that get caught in there, and the abdomen again appears that it's swollen, and then the bird does not do well. The third thing, and it's rare. It's rarer than the other two. The other two are very, very common. But the one rare thing is that they have a heart condition where their heart isn't pumping correctly and fluid builds up into the abdomen. So it is really essential for those birds being brought to a veterinarian so we can determine if there's a disease issue and if there is something we can do about it.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsor. We'd like to thank our sponsor of today's webinar, Goodwinol VetRx, whose products provide effective relief from respiratory diseases, CRD, Roop, scaly leg mites, favus, and eyeworm. It works for all poultry, chickens, turkeys, and game birds. Log on to www.goodwinol.com for the full list of their products and services, and find their advertisement in the current Backyard Poultry magazine out on racks and online at backyardpoultrymag.com. Thanks again to Goodwinol Vet RX. Okay, next we are going to get back to some layer questions. Sandy M. on Facebook asked us, I had a hen who must have had a large egg and had some trouble. It looks like some of her insides came out. What do we do for this? Dr. Davison, is this serious?
What the person is asking about is what's called a prolapse, and it can be very serious. So what happens when a bird lays an egg, the egg will come out, and that vent area may stay out a little bit longer. And other birds may peck on that area, and which causes more inflammation, and then that vent area will not go back in. And if it gets very serious, then other birds can peck so much, and then actually there can be internal organs that come out. So it can be very, very serious for the bird. If you see that birds are getting pecked on, or that vent area is irritated, or there's blood in that area, take that bird away from the group, and so the other birds will not injure that area anymore, so there's rest to that area. But it can be very serious issue if the other birds continue to peck on that vent area, because those birds, the internal organs can come out, and the bird will pass away from that.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Davison. Dr. Balam will ask that question a little differently, but what's the most common mistake you feel most new chicken owners make with layers?
Well, I think there's really two that I see that that occur quite often. One is they want to get baby chicks and they get too many of them. And we love to sell them more feed because they got a lot of chickens out there, but really we want them to have a good experience. And so the first thing we want them to do is size the amount of birds that you feel is comfortable for you to begin with. And usually that's 4 to 6 birds. Give it a try, and then when you're successful, you can add additional ones. And then from a management standpoint, the number one problem that we see that people don't recognize, particularly, again, I don't like stereotyping people, but particularly if you're in an urban environment, and that is predators. A lot of people say, well, I don't see them up there. Well, many of the predators are nocturnal. That is, they come out at night. So you've got, raccoons and things of that nature that will come out, foxes, you'll have a hawk in the area. So, from our standpoint, make sure that the chickens are protected. And there's some very inexpensive ways to do that. If you have a coop or you have a run, just run the wire that's coming down the side of the run or the house, just extend it down 6 inches into the ground and move it out perpendicular to the ground about 6 inches, and then cover it all up. And so nothing can burrow underneath. And then always I recommend, especially on runs, is put a roof on it. The roof protects any predator from getting in. It also protects in the rainy weather or snowy weather, and it protects, gives some shade in the summertime from the sun. So those are the two.
Great. Thank you. Alexandra, what laying issues do you most commonly come across on your farm?
Well, on my farm, we do have some changes in seasons. Here in Florida, either gets too hot or the birds are just not used to the cold. And mainly it's environmental or nutritional that happens here on the farm. And it's either to overcalcified eggs due to too much oyster shell, or not enough calcium in their diet, which would result in soft shells. And it's just tinkering with the diet. We do keep a good protein diet for all of our layers. But as the season changes, we also have to consider daylight. There are times where the birds just won't lay, so adjust lighting, make sure that the birds are getting adequate light for production. Another thing is predators. If predators come by, and we have bobcats here, we have coyotes, raccoons, opossums, you name it. So keeping the birds safe will help them lay better. If at night somebody is, little hands or eyes are peering in the cages, obviously we won't get any eggs. So mainly here on the farm, it's either environmental, nutritional, either you have to adjust their diet, or you have to make sturdy cages so no predators get in, as well as provide adequate lighting.
Great, thanks, Alexandra. Jeremy, what do you see on your farm as far as laying issues go, and how do you solve it?
Thankfully I don't have my large layer flock anymore, but it was quite a bit of work. But the most common laying problem I saw in my flock was cannibalism and picking, especially when I had a red variety bird like a sex link or a Rhode Island red, and a low energy bird like the Americana or Easter egger, if some people call them that. Uh, the reds tend to pick on the lower energy birds, and it causes a lot of problems. But people who contact me with laying problems, the most common problem by far is usually having something to do with photosensitivity. Either they are exposing their birds to way too much daylight or way too little daylight. Either they've allowed the days to go too short and the birds stop laying and they're not giving supplemental. So if they're not putting their lights on a timer, or also if you have your lights on but you don't have a timer and you forget to turn them off, it'll either shut your birds down if you have too little light, or if you have too much light, you see a lot more prolapses, and because the egg is getting too large because the bird is becoming sensitive to the light, especially if you have 24-hour lighting on, and it causes all sorts of havoc. So make sure you control your lighting, and also be sure that you minimize any possible cannibalism in your flock.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Jeremy. Next, we're going to go to a molting question, and we'll turn to Alexandra to get us started on it. Instagram user at Farm Fresh South shared concerns that they haven't seen their birds molt yet, and it's almost spring where they live. Should they be concerned, or is it harmless?
In my opinion, it's completely harmless. Every bird is different, and they have different physiological structures. So depending on when the bird actually hatched, it may take longer for them to molt than other birds. Now, in the production standpoint, we don't really, when a bird molts, it kind of dampers our production. They will continue to lay, but not as much as they should. So I wouldn't have anything to worry with the molting. Once again, every bird is different, just like humans. Some develop later than others. So it really depends on the bird itself, and it'll happen when it happens. You'll see a pillow fight. It looks like a pillow fight in their pen, which is completely normal. Once again, their production will go down because they're putting all that energy into losing and developing new feathers. So my best recommendations when it does happen is just to provide a little bit of higher protein to help with that energy. And there's you can add a little bit of chick starter to your layer diet, or some game bird starter, just to up that protein to help them go through the molting easier.
Makes sense. Pam, would you want to weigh on that one?
Just a couple of quick facts about molting. You do usually have a once-a-year refresh for your molting, but also molting can be caused because of stress, lack of food and water, light changes. So kind of keep an eye on your birds when they do molt to make sure it's just a normal seasonal molt and not something due to stress. Also, molt happens at about 16 to 18 months of age, so if that gives you an idea of when a bird should start molting. And they'll molt from their head, starting at the top of their head, and then kind of move down the neck and to the back of the body. So just a couple quick facts about molting.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you. We're down to the last 3 questions or so that we're going to ask the group, and we are going to ask the group to answer each one of these last 3 questions, similar to how we started. The first question comes from Jason on Facebook, who asked us about chickens with colds. He was wondering about using antibiotics and what to do if those aren't the answer. This is a common question, but we know antibiotics can spark a lot of debate, which is why we are asking everyone here to answer. We're going to start and keep with Pam. Pam, do you use antibiotics when you have a sick chicken?
Luckily, I'm going to knock on some wood here. I have not had to use antibiotics on my chickens. If I did have to, I'm not opposed to it. I really try to come at that from a method of prevention, so keeping my coop clean, well ventilated, nice, good, fresh food and water constantly. But, I caution about antibiotics. I liken them to, if you've got a sick kid at home and you take them to the doctor and you're thinking, oh, please, doctor, give them some antibiotics so they'll get better in a couple days. And so you sit there with the doctor, and all of a sudden the doctor says, this is a virus, so we really can't give you antibiotics. You just have to go home and treat the symptoms. you're thinking, oh no, because that's going to take a little bit longer. It's a little bit harder. But, you know, I like to tell people that story because it's the same as with chickens. You need to find a vet or a reputable person who can take a look at your chickens and diagnose them and find out, just like with your kids and with you, are they sick with a virus or is it something that can be treated by antibiotics? Because a virus won't be able to be treated by antibiotics.
Makes sense. Thanks, Pam. Dr. Davison, what advice would you give?
I agree with Pam. Don't reach for the antibiotics first, and you really should consult with a veterinarian for the use of antibiotics. One thing we don't want to happen is the overuse of antibiotics, because with the overuse of antibiotics, you can get resistance. And when we really do need to treat your bird with antibiotics, that bacteria may be resistant, and we won't have anything to treat. And you need to understand, just as Pam said, that there are certain things such as an infectious bronchitis, which is a virus. We don't use antibiotics. Or if your coop has a buildup of moisture and you get ammonia, that may present in the bird as a respiratory disease, but we're not going to use antibiotics in that particular situation either. So we want people to have the antibiotics there if in case we need to use it, but we need to use them for bacteria, and we want to make sure we don't get resistance built up. So we will have that tool to use in case your bird does get sick.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Davison. Dr. Balam, same question. What advice do you give when people ask about antibiotics or sick chickens?
Well, I can't add too much to what has already been said, but I want to make a clear distinction between general medicated feed and antibiotics. You know, the number of companies, we put out a medicated feed for starter birds, but that medication is a coccidiosis. It's not an antibiotic, and it helps prevent those birds from getting a parasite called cocci, and it just helps the birds develop an immunity, so when they're adults you don't have to feed any medication, and it just helps those birds cope with the cocci that's in the ground, it's naturally occurring, and then allows the birds to develop immunity over time. But again, that's very different than an antibiotic, and I would say exactly what everybody else has said in terms of antibiotics is you need to have that prescribed by a veterinarian.
Thank you. Jeremy, we'll turn to you next. What do you do with your flock when they're sick, and have you used antibiotics, or would you suggest antibiotics?
I haven't used antibiotics in quite a while, and when I did, it was under direction of a professional. I don't even keep antibiotics around. I avoid the use at all costs. If there is a genuine need, I will use it. I have no problem with using it. But again, you really needed to discuss that with a veterinarian, and just using it at will and willy-nilly is a recipe for disaster. It's a really good way to just worsen the situation, especially if it's a cold. When you say cold, a lot of people are referring to a virus, and it's just not going to do anything for you. Like Pam said, you have to treat symptoms and let it ride out if it is a virus. So, yeah, I avoid it, but I have no problems with it. Talk to a veterinarian, please. Please talk to someone.
Right. Sensing a theme here. Alexander, do you have anything to add?
Well, the other panelists did a wonderful job, explaining, the issues of antibiotics. Too many people are pumping their birds with antibiotics. Now, I understand it's prevention, but many diseases present the same symptoms. So if you are, if you don't want to take your bird to the veterinarian and you are giving them an antibiotic for something that they actually don't have, regardless if they are sneezing and coughing, that sneezing and coughing might be something serious. What I would recommend, though, for prevention is to practice good animal husbandry. Give the birds clean water, feed them constantly. Well, not feed them constantly, but provide adequate feed to them so that they don't, they're not deprived of it. Because it's very important to understand that if the bird is showing symptoms, that you should treat them correct the first time to avoid any further problems later on. So definitely contact your veterinarian and see on options. Personally, I do have a medicine cabinet. I have Wazine, I have Solmet. I keep, antibiotics on in the medicine cabinet. However, I rarely use it due to practicing good animal husbandry. But if I do see anybody sick, immediately do they go to the isolation pen so the other birds are not sick. And if, knock on wood, if culling is necessary, it's better to sacrifice the one bird than lose your entire flock. So it's very important to know that antibiotics is not the only solution. You can practice a lot of other things to have a healthy flock.
Great. Thank you, Alexandra. Appreciate it. All right, next group question. We're going to ask about litter in the coop. Also, there's a lot of different methods and a lot of different ways. Tracy on Facebook asked us, what do you think is the best method for litter? And she said she'd tried straw, shavings, and a combination of the two, and is using the deep litter method now, but is already sensing a daunting cleanup. Is there a best low-maintenance solution? We'll start with Jeremy. What do you use?
I prefer the deep litter method. I've tried several different ways of doing it, and yeah, if she's doing it properly, it's going to look like a big deal, because I know in my coop I have a 10 by 16 brooder barn, and I like to put anywhere between 12 to 16 inches of saw shavings down, and the reason that I A, use that much, and B, use shavings is A, when you have a water that leaks or you get a lot of moisture in the coop, the bedding soaks up all that moisture. And the beautiful thing about the shavings is when you get a nice warm day and you have the ventilation, right, it releases and lets it all back out. Unlike hay and straw, where it just sits there and it molds and it becomes a petri dish of infection, basically. Nice warm bedding with a wet environment is a great breeding ground for all sorts of things you don't want to deal with. So I use the shavings, and I go as deep as I do, because as you're going through the flock's lifespan on that bedding, you can just till it in. Use a pitchfork. You can throw some grain on the ground and let them scratch it over, and they'll turn it themselves. And it saves you from having to keep adding all the time, because if you actually dig it up and till it and fluff it up, you'll get fresh shavings again and again. Once that turns gray all the way through, yeah, you have to shovel it out, and yeah, it is a lot of material, but it's light because it's been allowing all that moisture to leave. And when the shavings are done and they're still dry, it's almost like shoveling sand, probably even easier than shoveling sand. So yeah, it'll take a little effort. Use a wide like union scoop to clear it, but it's not going to be back breaking, and it will be the most effective method you can possibly find, as far as I'm concerned.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. Alexandra, what do you use?
I've tried many methods with litter. I started off with deep litter method, which if it works in your environment, I perfectly recommend. I lived in 2 areas in Florida already, so one area the deep litter method worked really well, mainly because the coops were a little bit closer to water. So what happened is that the higher the litter was, the birds didn't get wet as much. And then I would constantly add pine shavings to it, which did compost quite well, less of a smell. During the wintertime, it does get cold in Florida too. The birds were a little bit warmer. But as I'm now in the Tampa area, we do have hay in our coops, but we also, due to the fact that we do have many species on our farm, depending on the need of that bird specifically, some are raised on wire, some are raised on hay, but definitely it works here. Now, hay does get wet, litter does get wet, and then they harbor a lot of naughty little pests and bacteria, which can make the bird sick. So once you see the pen a little bit mucky, just take out the hay and then add in more hay. But it is a nice substrate here where I'm at. Now, I find that there is no best method for litter, since it is based on your environment. However, the reason why I do have a substrate is that where I'm living currently, I have very fine sand and dirt, which I don't recommend as a really good litter method. Now, river sand is completely different, and if you want to use it as your bedding solution, that's perfectly fine. However, here, because it's so sandy, the hay works really well, making it a nice layer. But I have tried, I brood a lot, so I've used pine pellets and shavings. Pine pellets work really well for chicks since it doesn't degrade as fast, and it keeps the smell easier to clean. As for wire, we raise a lot of chicks on wire. Some chickens are on wire because of their immunity, that they can get sick easier than other chickens. So once again, it really depends on your own environment and what works best for you. Try a few methods of bedding and see what would work better. But regardless of what litter method you use, there will be some cleaning involved because you do want to practice good animal husbandry. So cleanliness is very important as well. However, it is based on your own environment that you live in.
Great. Thanks, Alexandra. Pam, what do you use?
I use pine shavings. I have a raised coop, and the pine shavings work really well in it. They're very easy to get. They're inexpensive. They're absorbent. They're easy to clean. So I use pine shavings in my coop.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Davison, what do you recommend?
As the previous speaker said, it's really what works well for you. But the key here is make sure things are dry, so there's not the buildup of bacteria and fungus and ammonia in there. But one other thing that we've had problems with birds coming into the laboratory that have actually died because they actually ate the hay or the straw. Many of them actually were eating the straw. So you need to really observe your birds. Make sure they're eating the food and not the bedding, and make sure that the food is readily available to them. So just one thing again, looking at your birds, observing your birds, and seeing what they're doing, because that straw or hay will get into the gizzard, which is their stomach, and will get impacted in there, and then they can't pass it out of them. So, and will cause some problems.
Great. Thank you. And Dr. Balam, anything to add?
Not really. I think the dryness is the critical part to successful litter. If you think of your home, where do you get the mold growth? It's in the bathroom, and the reason for that is that you have a lot of warmth and a little bit of moisture, and it's the same in the chicken coop. So a lot of different methods out there. I think elbow grease is the most successful. Is that we use pine shavings. We use a large particle, so if the birds do try to eat it, it's very difficult to eat. And then we keep it dry. And if you have a little bit of moisture, either from the water or something like that, we remove that litter immediately and replace it with fresh litter. So I think those are the critical points for being successful.
Great. Try them and keep them dry. I appreciate that. We'll go to our last question today. It's going to come from us at Backyard Poultry. I wanted to ask Dr. Balam and Dr. Davison, and have Alexander and Jeremy round this out too. What type of research is going into chickens that will help the small flock owner, and are there any major breakthroughs on the horizon? We'll start with Dr. Davison.
It's an excellent question. As you know, the backyard owner and the number of people who own backyard birds is growing. And many of them really need information about management, need information about diseases, etc. So what I did is I went back over our records over the past couple of years to see what was the most common diseases. And then we go out and give seminars to tell them what the common diseases or management problems are. And so for the listeners today, one of the biggest things is Merrick's disease, which is a virus causing tumors. The next one we see very commonly is Mycoplasma gallisepticum, which is chronic respiratory disease. Then we see tumors not related to Merrick's disease. We see infected oviducts, and what I already talked about, which is the impaction, but actually impaction of grass in the gizzard. We see that fairly commonly. But I really want to make the point with Merrick's disease. Please, please have your birds vaccinated for Merrick's disease. So get them from a hatchery that they are vaccinated. There's two major control methods for Merrick's: getting them vaccinated, and then also, as we've talked a lot about today, is keeping your coop clean so we can keep the virus down. You may not eliminate Merrick's disease, but you'll reduce the probability that you'll get it. So the key here, vaccinated birds for Merrick's, keeping your coop clean.
Great, thank you. Dr. Balam, what research are you guys doing, or what are you keeping your eyes on out there?
Well, at our research facility, what we did is we invested in coops out here because a lot of the research that had been done in the past had been done with chickens in cages, and the birds' requirements and the management techniques needed for birds in coops are quite a bit different than in cages. So again, from our standpoint, we're focusing on anything that we do is we're going to do research in coops. The most interesting information that's available today, I think, is there are certain ingredients that really improve the overall intestinal health, or the health of the digestive tract. And if you improve and maintain a healthy digestive tract, you also improve the overall immune system of the bird. And so factors such as effective, and again, there's a lot of compounds out there, but in our research program you can't determine that. But again, there's some very good probiotics out there, there's some good prebiotics out there, as well as some yeast-type compounds that really help the overall digestive health of the bird, and then help support the immune health as well. And I think the other thing is critical is just education. Forums like this, magazines like such as yourselves, I think really help educate people and keep them current with what is the most effective way to raise birds as well. So, thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Alexandra, what are you keeping your eyes on, or what are you seeing?
With the popularity of backyard chickens, one of the major things I'm seeing is more education. With the new backyard owners, I know it's scary to see, my bird is sick, what to do, and pictures of birds seeking help for others. However, one major thing that is happening is that there's more education on biosecurity. Now, diseases can be transferred, going to the feed store, driving home, from any animal-related area, and more education is given on how to prevent such diseases to enter your farm, because some of them can be treatable but not incurable. Because a happy chicken is a healthy chicken, full of production, wonderful behavior. You observe your birds obviously daily to see what's going on, so you can better improve your flock. So with the ongoing chicken enthusiast out there, more education is given so that we're seeing, we'll still be seeing, diseases happen because, they don't go away. However, there's more prevention occurring. I understand many do like tours of farms, but the farmers are preventing it. They're still allowing people to come and see their farm, but there's preventative measures as to disease being spread. So biosecurity is one of the major breakthroughs that I'm seeing currently, and is very important to me personally as a flock owner, as well for the business. So definitely that's something that I'm watching for.
Great, thanks, Alexandra. Jeremy, you get the privilege and the burden of finishing this answer and today's questions today. So Jeremy, what do you have?
Well, thank you. No pressure, huh? The technology that I'm really interested in right now is the black box technology coming out of UConn right now. Under, let's see, it's Dr. Michael Derry, one of his graduate students, was working on a vocalization product where they've identified, I think, like 150 some odd vocalizations of chickens. They can identify everything from there's a rat in the coop to there's a certain person. I mean, they can tell one employee from the other. I mean, it's pretty incredible. They've been able to really decipher some of the vocalizations of the birds, and they're trying to put that into a black box technology. I really wish they would release it to the open source group, the community at large, because I'm sure there's a hackerspace somewhere that could turn a Raspberry Pi into some sort of black box for the coop. If they could develop that to the point where you can hang a small computer in your chicken coop that works off of an Ethernet cable and power over Ethernet, you just drop it in there and it'll come up with a web interface saying, hey, there's a rat in the coop, or they're running out of water, or have your chickens tell you what's going on. I mean, that's that's a really wild concept to me. Hey, idiot, you forgot to feed us this morning. You know, where's our feed? You know, I just think that's really cool, and I'm really hoping that comes down the pipe real quick.
Very cool. Chicken translator. I love it. That's excellent. That does it for the our first Healthy Chickens webinar. Thanks for everybody tuning in today and our panelists. A quick reminder that our next broadcast will be April 30th at 2 o'clock Eastern Time and sponsored by Purina. We'll get to a lot of questions and different questions during that webinar. But to wrap up today, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Goodwinol Vet RX, and most importantly, I'd like to thank everyone who logged on and participated in today's session. Don't forget to follow Backyard Poultry on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram for our daily stories, pictures, videos, and how-to articles aimed at helping your flocks. Again, I'm Ryan Slaybaugh with Backyard Poultry Magazine, and along with everybody at Goodwinol, we hope you learned as much as we did from our panelists today. I'd like to thank Alexandra Douglas, Jeremy Chartier, Dr. Gordon Balam, Pam Freeman, and Dr. Shell Davison for their time. We wish everyone a good day and hope everyone has a happy and healthy flock.